Well, good evening, this is Houndlog Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and this is basically breaking news. President Emmanuel Macron is rushed from a theatre by security guards because protesters broke in, and the threat of attack was so great. As I say, he was whisked out of the back door and into a waiting limo, and bang, he was gone. And this is just the latest in a series of embarrassing situations for Macron, all the way from the yellow vest, which have been going on I think nigh on 60 odd weeks. The unions have joined the protests over pensions and pension reform, and I think Macron is probably one of the most hated presidents that France has ever had. And in a recent poll, fully 2/3 of the population do not trust President Emmanuel Macron. He is one of the elitist globalists who are tone deaf to the public and what really it's like to live on a ground level. These people are so tone deaf, it is absolutely unbelievable. I think that, well, the next election is coming up in 2022, and I think you are going to see Marine Le Penn is just going to sweep the field. It seems across the world people are really just getting sick and tired of the arrogance of these people, you know, who seem to think that they know best for everybody to such an extent that they can close every door of communication and just keep pretending that what they're doing is what the public really want. And as I said before, and I'm going to say it again, you know, you can paper over a lie, but you cannot paper over the consequences of that lie. And these are the consequences of the lie, of course, and the lie is globalism. You know, just as the globalists are pushing centralization and central government management, as the EU is, all run from Brussels, the world is decentralizing via the internet. And of course, in time, we will just view this ideology in the rearview mirror of history as just another flawed system, and flawed it is. And of course, you can see by the reaction of the public, same with Brexit, the most recent election in the UK and the upcoming election in the US, that people are getting more and more tired of being governed by arrogant aristocrats who want to wave their hand. And of course, you know, it's kind of interesting. This came up the other day in the US election. You know, is you have these left-leaning socialists like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, who are millionaires. They're millionaires. Emmanuel Macron is probably a millionaire too. He's an ex-Rothschild banker. What do they know about our lives? Just like Ricky Gervais said, you know nothing about what the public have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so the fact that protesters are prepared to storm and find out, and they actually found out where Macron was and stormed the theatre, I think is a real indication. Because if we had a situation in Iran at the Straits of Hormuz and oil prices tripled, I think you would see the number of people on the streets would be tripling, because the pain would be just too intense for all of them to bear. You'd be hitting so many parts of your society. So people like Macron had better look out, because their day is over. They're just not going to make it, I'm afraid. It is just another failed ideology, and thank goodness. I like the idea of having elections, at least being able to elect your politicians. I'd like to see more public control over government, more referendum, this kind of stuff, more respect of the public's opinion. And get down to the basics. Fix the roads, fix the bridges, make sure that your population have a roof over their heads, food in their belly, and clothes on their backs. That is your absolute minimum requirement as a government. And that, of course, as we can see, is sadly not being taken care of. And, you know, we're embarking on other adventures before we can even look after our own people. You know, I actually saw a great poster the other day, and it said that, you know, governments want you to believe that they can fix the entire planet when they can't even fix potholes. And there you go. Enough said. Emmanuel Macron, I think your days are numbered. And this from the Express. Macron panic. Armed guards evacuate president as violent protesters storm French theatre. French President Emmanuel Macron was evacuated from a Paris theatre last night after violent protesters broke into the venue in an attempt to confront the country's embattled leader. And this is from January the 18th, 2020. Furious protests against Emmanuel Macron escalated last night after a group of protesters managed to storm the theatre the French president was attending. The mob of anti-government protesters could be heard chanting anti-Macron slogans as they clashed with police at the venue. The level of violence prompted security forces to swiftly evacuate Mr. Macron from the building, rushing him out to a black car under a hail of boos. While police tried to hold back the protesters, several managed to break into the building amid chants of "Macron resign." It is unclear what the protesters would have done if they had reached the French president amid soaring anger at his controversial pension reforms. And again from the Express, Macron crisis. Nearly 2/3 of French people say don't trust president in a poll. Nearly 2/3 of French people don't trust President Emmanuel Macron, a poll published on Thursday found, as the young centrist grapples to contain protests against his controversial overhaul of the country's unwieldy pension system. The poll, conducted by a lab for Les Echos newspaper and Radio Classique, showed that 63% of those interviewed don't trust their 42-year-old leader, up 2 percentage points from last month. And I think this is a typo here. It says trust, but I think it's meant to be don't trust. And interesting right here on the side here, EU on alert. Protests break out in Germany and Ireland amid anger at Brussels regulations. It's happening all over the place, isn't it? 63% of respondents, however, told posters they don't trust Macron, down 2 points in 1 month. Hardline trade unions blocked ports and cut output at electricity generation sites on Thursday in a bid to force Macron to withdraw the pension reform. But turnout fell again at protest marches and the impact of transport strikes weakened. At a 6th protest organised by unions, the Interior Ministry counted only 187,000 marching nationwide, including 23,000 in Paris, compared to 452,000, including 56,000 in Paris last week. The first major anti-pension reform rallies on December the 5th had attracted more than 800,000 people nationwide. The union-led strikes are now in the 44th day, but the industrial action has lost impetus since the Macron government made some concessions and as the strike starts to hit workers' wallets. And Macron plans to merge the country's 42 separate pension schemes into a single points-based system he says will be fairer and more sustainable. He says the changes are needed to end deficits that could reach £14 billion, 17 billion euros by 2025 if no action is taken. And as I've said before, these are old contracts, and the game is here is to break that contract. It's to get you to agree to make that contract, the 42 separate pension plans, null and void, and then they can introduce a new system, which of course will change as time goes forward. Right now, the country is locked into guaranteed contracts with these 42 separate pension schemes and can't get out of them. That's why they want to break the contract. Be very, very careful what you wish for. While he has vowed to push through the overhaul despite the protests, his Prime Minister said in a letter to unions and employers last week that the government was prepared to drop plans to raise the retirement age if certain conditions were met. So as you can see, it doesn't matter what the people say, really. He's going to push through his overhaul despite the protests. And that is why these people are clueless, tone deaf, and need to be gone. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.